Friends, welcome. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the Gnostic Institute of Esoteric Magic, and we continue with our seminar and meditation. Thus far, we have covered very important stuff. We have spoken about ecstasy and the subconsciousness. We have spoken about the science of meditation, the technique of meditation. And tonight, we are going to deviate a little bit from our typical lesson, and we're going to focus this one into being a very instructional session. This is called the 10 Rules of Meditation. Again, this is a seminar that is meant for students of an intermediate level. Those of you who are intermediate level, thank you for being here. If you feel that this is appropriate for you and you have any and you take it and you have any questions, just make sure that you get a hold of us. So our goal today is dual. By the time that we are done with today's session, you're going to be familiar with the concept of this thing called serene reflection and the 10 rules of meditation. And you're going to be familiar with when and how to apply these particular rules. What we are seeking to do here is to develop our ability so that we can methodically become master meditators, focusing on the awareness of the consciousness, on serenity, and ultimately in achieving the emancipation of the consciousness. A few things that I would like to remind everyone, in case you have not seen the previous lessons. This is not an intellectual exercise. As Samael tells us, intellect, when it comes to intellect, it is not experiential knowledge. The intellect is erudition. The intellect is the accumulation of information. It is the ability to compare, to retrieve it, and exercise some logical process with it. So erudition itself is not experience. Anything that is associated with seeking for proof, an essay, some kind of demonstration here in this plane of substance, that is not unitotal. This is not what we are seeking to do. What we are striving to do is have a deeper understanding on these mental formations that are flowing through the screen of the mind in a way in which we can perceive them, comprehend them, analyze them, bring them to a synthesis so that we can return into the exercise of meditation itself. Because we have learned that we put into practice the transmutation of our creative energy by the exercise of pranayama. But notice that here we say our mental formations are illusions. That is very true. In the Eastern tradition, these illusions are known as Maya. And we, here in the West, we tend to hear this thing called illusion, and we start thinking in terms of a mirage or an apparition or something that is like the effect of smoke and mirrors. And I want to take you out of that particular space. Because knowing that everything here is impermanent, knowing that all that surrounds us is constantly changing, the fact that it is impermanent like that, it is telling us that it is not that thing which is real, that thing that transcends time, space, and the eternity. And fixing on the idea that our mental formations are illusions can lead us down the path of making sincere mistakes. For example, if we know that all of these things are transitory, that they are impermanent, that they're always changing, and thus that they are not real, we could pretend that these things don't exist and fail many tests, fail before many ordeals. We could believe that because they are illusions and they are, again, transitory and impermanent and thus not real, that we should not pay attention to them. When we do that, based on the teachings of the Hermetic science, we would be falling into the space of something that is called the divine paradox. And what the divine paradox is telling us as students, as sincere seekers, is it is okay for us to know that all of these things are transitory, impermanent, and not real. But while we're here in the plane of consciousness, we must manage them and deal with them as if they were real. So our mental formations are illusions. We're just not going to make pretend that they don't exist, that they will just disappear. We know that they are not real, but we will nevertheless contemplate them to understand their origin, so that we can find the synthesis that is necessary, the comprehension that when invoking the power of our Divine Mother can bring us into the elimination of those aggregates and the liberation of some proportional percentage of consciousness to the thing that we have comprehended. Because for us, what is truly necessary is the ability to liberate that interior Buddhist principle from the mind. We have already learned that we are not equipped yet to receive the greatness, the vastness, the power of our being. And thus the being cannot penetrate in us. We cannot incarnate it because it would consume us. It is just too much for this insignificant form that we carry here in the plane of substance. So, seeking to liberate the consciousness from the mind, bringing about that emancipation, gives the consciousness the opportunity of experiencing those higher realms of creation and finding itself in the expansiveness of the being, which is that illuminating void. But for this, we must have a blank mind, a clear mind. We already know that having a blank mind, trying to force a blank mind, trying to dominate the mind in such a way, this is all superficial, this is hollow, this is all intellectual. We try to violently subdue the mind is going to effectively fight back. And you may think that everything is quiet. You may be looking with your eyes closed and you may be thinking to yourself, no thoughts, nothing is happening. The mind is actually quiet. But in reality, it is not, because you are actually hearing it say these things. There is indeed a thinker there that is articulating these thoughts with this mental voice. So what are we striving for? Clear consciousness, but that in the tranquility of no thinking. We are seeking serene reflection. And in the Eastern tradition, particularly in Chinese Zen Buddhism, this is known as Mo Chao. This serene reflection, this serenus reflectus, is the clear effect of the action of an internal unfoldment. And this quietness arrives as we are working on that transmutation of our creative energy. And whenever we see a thought, whenever we perceive a thought, to employ the necessary willpower so that we can stop that exercise of transmutation and come back and understand from where this thought is coming from, the effects of this thought, what else is following it, what is that web of connections that enables transactions between or among different psychological aggregates. This is what we're seeking. So let's go into these 10 rules of meditation. Let's cover them quickly, and then let's expand on them so that you can get the benefit of good use for practical application. The 10 rules are exceedingly simple. First thing we want to do is to become fully aware of our emotional state. When we are fully aware of our emotional state, we can, in a way, reverse engineer the effort so that we can see what psychological aggregate is the one creating the most influence. Because we have already learned that based on the flow of creation, there is a causal, a willful impulse, and when that spark generates, the first thing that crystallizes is a thought. After the thought, an emotion will manifest. And when the emotion is present, it takes on the vitality of the body, and the emotion itself crystallizes within the body. And we see it by when we notice rolling our eyes or grinding our teeth or clenching our jaw or frowning our forehead, this kind of things. So we want to become fully aware of our emotional state. When we are aware of our emotional state, we can then take that back into what thoughts am I experiencing under this emotional state? Because some thoughts existing within the subconscious happen at levels that exist below the detection level of the intellect. And you will feel the emotion, but the thought would be so elusive that your intellect will not be able to grasp it. So make yourself fully aware of your emotional state. As we can start identifying those thoughts, let's investigate the origin of every thought. Let's investigate the origin of every emotion. Every emotion, again, emerges as a consequence of a thought. Let's look for the origin of every thought. And to do this, as we start noticing those mental formations, those mental forms that come to mind, serene observation. We are there perceiving, contemplating, with no judgment, with no pushback, no resistance, no objection. We are contemplating. So to build on this third rule, hold a sensation of contemplation at every moment of your daily life. Do not wait until you sit down to meditate to try to be contemplative. Make the habit of holding a sensation of contemplation throughout your day, and when you come into the practice of meditation, that has become a good habit. So hold that sensation of contemplation at every moment of your daily life. And for you to be able to maintain that sensation of contemplation, rule number 5, assume a receptive psychological state. That receptive psychological state invites seeing, perceiving the thought. If we are pushing back against the thought, if we don't like it, if it makes us feel cringe or uncomfortable and we would like just to not look at it now or make pretend that the thought does not exist, well, we are not being receptive. So we assume a receptive psychological state. And both during the day, at the time of meditation, we carry tenacity, firmness, and consistency of purpose in the practice. We bring these good rules into effect during our daily life in our state of pistis. We start creating good habits. Not only we repeat during the practice of meditation, but when the physical body goes to sleep and the ego, dressed in its lunar bodies, leaves the body to roam in the astral plane as a dream, then we carry those good habits into the dream state. And suddenly you find yourself as this multitude of psychological aggregates dressed in a lunar garment in the astral plane, and you realize where you are, and you start having those momentaneous sparks of the awakening of the consciousness. Rule number 7, whenever possible, participate of group meditation. That is always a great idea, more so when you are working together with people with whom you are sharing affinity, because we're all seeking this very same product of that emancipation, of the elimination of the psychological aggregates, of that self-realization of the being. Those forces start combining and generate some beautiful vortexes that allow for people to benefit from the effort. Rule number 8, become vigilant of your own mind. So as these random thoughts come around during the day, do not wait until you sit down to meditate, to be vigilant. Be vigilant during the day. And as you are vigilant, you will see that at some point you are wanting to say something that you shouldn't, and you immediately capture the voice of the silence, that voice of the consciousness, telling you, do not. Mistake, do not do that. At the time of meditating, a good rule is to avoid sensorial perceptions. So if you can please close your eyes, close your eyes. If there are noises around and you have noise-canceling headphones, wear them during your exercise of meditation. If you have earmuffs, like noise-canceling earmuffs, wear those as well. Because as you deprive yourself from those external distractions, you deprive the ego of more reactions because of things that the ego is already familiar with. And last but not least, absolute relaxation and a wise combination of meditation and sleep. Important that we are at that perfect balance, half awake, half asleep to meditate. Because when we are doing this, the ego can step out of the body, just like when it does when we fall asleep, and the vital body can then start exercising that practice of rearranging those neural networks, and the repetition of the exercise helps build on your myelionation, which are these sheaths that the body helps create around these neural patterns, allowing those connections to be stronger and for those habits to become more fruitful. So these are, in a brief snapshot, the 10 rules of meditation. So full awareness of your emotional state. Notice that we flag these rules in 2 distinct colors. There is a purpose for that. Allow me to come back. These 3 that are standing out, these 3 are very specific for the moment that you're meditating. If you can go to a group meditation, by all means, go ahead and do that. If you can do it alone, do it by yourself. Avoid external sensorial perceptions, eyes closed. If you can block the noise from your ears, even better. If it is cold, throw a nice blanket over yourself. Wool blanket is phenomenal. Absolute relaxation, wise combination between meditation and sleep. But everything else is every moment. If you need a guideline on how is it that you can live your day, go with these other 7 rules. And the fact that there are 7 should not surprise you, because the law of the 7, the law of Epta para Parshinok, helps bring organization into the cosmos, and it helps organize your day. So these are the 10 rules. Full awareness of your emotional state. What does that mean? Every thought that emerges within the understanding is preceded by pleasure, pain, happiness, sadness, likes or dislikes. There are thoughts associated to that. Judgments, criticisms, adulations, manifestations of desire, craving for more, all of those thoughts will exist there. And as you remain aware of your emotional state, that understanding is going to tell you where is it that you are polarizing yourself. In that continuum that we learn on that principle of polarity, where are you relative to what the extremes are, so that you can work on the necessary synthesis. There must be psychoanalysis. But let's not get academic with this. What we are seeking here is the expression of serene reflection. We want the consciousness to perceive. We don't need the ego judging, stating its opinions, pushing back. So examine and inquire about the origin, the cause, the reason, or any fundamental motive of every thought, of every memory, of every image, of every affection, of every desire, of anything that is showing in the screen of the mind. This second rule will bring about for you a wealth of knowledge. All of it in terms of self-discovery and self-revelation. So examine and inquire. Inquire, question. Why is this there? Where is this coming from? Where else have we seen this? Of course, these are not questions you're verbalizing. These are questions that the consciousness can immediately manifest without having to exercise any effort. And allow me to tell you this, embrace the principle of spontaneity. Because as we start awakening those faculties of clairvoyance, our being will communicate with intuits, and the intuits will immediately manifest as like a mental image frame that is loaded with information, and it will show you something that is important, that is crucial, that should call the attention of the consciousness. So if you reject that, if you push it away, you may be missing on a big opportunity. Examine and inquire about the origin, embrace that principle of spontaneity, and as that image comes, contemplate it, and find in it the fundamental reason, the root cause of the thought, the memory, the image, the affection, etc. We need absolute attention to these mental forms that take place within the screen of the intellect. And serene reflection, as we are observing, as we are allowing the consciousness, with that exercise of allowing it to manifest its willpower, be able to perceive, well, that serene reflection brings you into the quietude and the silence of the mind. Eventually, that mind will stop projecting thoughts, images, desires, affections, afflictions. As it does that, as it slows down, there is the opportunity to emancipate. We stated earlier, maintain a sensation of contemplation. So what do the masters tell us? They say, make an effort to maintain and sustain that sensation at every moment, every day. It comes to mind an astral experience that Samael shares with us, as one day he finds himself at the office of an attorney. And he is sitting at the lobby, and the administrative assistant or the secretary, she is sitting behind the desk. And everything looks, Samael says, exactly as it looks in the physical plane. But because he maintains that sensation of contemplation, he suddenly realizes that there is a glass figurine of a butterfly on the desk, but that it is gently moving its wings. Samael sees that, says, wait a minute. He excuses himself. He walks outside, and once he's outside, he jumps with the intent to float in air. He finds himself floating. He says, I'm in the astral plane. He comes back in. He tries to tell the lady, please realize your body is somewhere in your home, sleeping. We are in the astral plane. She says, she looked at him perplexed, confused. Ultimately, he said she was too asleep to realize what was happening. So he said his goodbyes. He walked out of that space, and he went out floating into the airs of mystery. So make an effort to maintain and sustain that sensation of contemplation every moment, every day. And throughout the day, make sure that your intellect is receptive. Somebody tells you something, you feel that they're judging you, that is not being receptive. Somebody is asking you to do something, you think that they are just ordering you around, and you feel like you have to push back, that is not being receptive. Let's be receptive, because that is how the mind, as it vibrates, it crystallizes those vibrations. The substance of the mind, which is chitta, the mind, transforms into vibrating undulations, that is, vrittis. And all thoughts are perturbations on the surface of the waters of this ocean of the mind. So what do we want? We want our lake. We want that little space in that vastness of the ocean to be pristine, to be like a polished glass with no disturbance at all. So we listen, we perceive, and we are in a state of receptive contemplation. And we do this when we're brushing our teeth, when we're getting dressed in the morning, contemplative as we're driving our car to work, as we're greeting our friends, as we're getting some breakfast, as we are sitting at the computer, as we are looking at the many things that we have in our many different computer screens at work. carry that continuity of purpose. Because if we leave the continuity of purpose only for the 30 minutes or the hour of meditation that you can do once a day, some people once a week, other people once a month, that is not continuity of purpose. And the master tells us, samadhi, ecstasy, is not for the people who are inconsistent. It is not for the people who are lacking willpower. So bring that continuity of purpose in everything you do, in everything that you get done, that ability to perceive, that ability to contemplate, have a receptive mind that is not disturbed by anything. Samael mentions the Gnostic Lumisols. Gnostic Lumisols are temples. And we can exercise this scientific meditation. We know that it is scientific because we have already been learning about the causes and the effects. And this is something that is verifiable and you can put it into use, practice it, and experience by yourself. So this scientific meditation can very well be practiced by yourself. In your bedroom, you can go outside to the mountains, on a rock, the bed of a river, out of the beach, in the beautiful white sands of the Caribbean. All of those are beautiful places for you to meditate. But if you can do it among a group of people who hold affinity in a space that is considered sacred, consecrated, even better. We spoke earlier about continuity of purpose. And part of that continuity requires us to be spies of our own mind. We must become spies of our mind as we contemplate it, so that we can be seeing what the mind is trying to do, where it is taking us within that space of the mental plane from moment to moment. As we are spies of the mind, and we are seeing, contemplating what the mind is doing from moment to moment, it becomes a lot easier for us to identify sensorial perceptions. It is true that for the exercise of meditation, we must eliminate those sensorial perceptions. Again, eyes closed, we cannot block the noise with earmuffs or noise-canceling headphones. But also, you will notice how is it that during the day, some people will use an object like a pen to try to soothe themselves. And you will see how they can touch their face or their neck with a pen, or how they will be grabbing themselves and squeezing their arms or rubbing their hands as they're standing before a crowd. We start becoming aware of all of these habits and mannerisms, that they are just not there for free. They require of an energetic source to exist. And as of now, it is energy that is being taken away from what we can use for our spiritual practice, because it's taking of our own creative energy. And instead of leaving it available for this other practice, it is burning it and consuming it right then and there for the sake of sensations. And during the day, absolute relaxation. In our lesson, back when we were in the pre-chamber, we spoke about learning how to listen. And one thing that we learned is that whether we are going through a great celebration or through an adversity, that we should be always in the very same relaxed state, so that we can perceive the impressions that are coming to us. As we perceive them with the senses, that we can transform them. But for that, we must be relaxed. If we are tense, if we're stiff, it becomes very difficult to do so. We make that habit during the day, and then at the time of meditation, then our muscles become relaxed so much easier. So we do that, we bring that good habit, and we can then start provoking and regulating sleep at will. Then you don't have to wait until you feel a little sleepy to do your meditation. You can simply sit down, and with that deep relaxation inundates the physicality so fast that with that relaxation, you can induce that state of being half awake and half asleep. And what do the masters tell us? They say illumination results from the wise combination of sleep and meditation. And this is what takes us outside of the space of the body, outside of affections, outside of the burdens of the mind. Once liberated from the intellect, the consciousness is free of everything else and experiences that phenomenal illuminating void. Let's close by sharing with you something for context, something that you can weigh, put into use, and determine if it helps you or if it does not help you. Samael is consistently speaking of the 49 subconscious departments of the mind. We know very well that it's 49 because Kabbalistically 9 and 4 add up to 13. And 13 is the arcanum of death. It is the arcanum of transformation. It is the arcanum of ending something so that new things can emerge. We understand that. But to give this a little bit more context, let us share with you this as a product of our reflection. This is not something that Samael shares with his wisdom. This is not something that he writes in his books, and we cannot consider this to be just gnosis, because it isn't, okay? But what we're showing you here with this matrix that happens to be a 7 by 7 matrix, 49, is how is it that the ego itself uses subjectiveness as its superpower to deceive. Notice that in this diagonal, we have the manifestation of the 7 capital sins. These 7 main psychological aggregates that we have, that we all know: greed, envy, gluttony, anger, lust, pride, and laziness. But as you look at the ordinate and the abscissa, the y-axis and the x-axis of this matrix, you will see the very same 7 defects. Sure, you see them. You will also notice that one side of the matrix is a little darker than the other. And that is done like that with a purpose. The lighter side are those manifestations of our psychological aggregates where the ego projects itself as if it were a saint, as if it were benign, friendly, helpful, charitable, all of these things that we think that we are when we know in reality how is it that we behave. On the darker side of this matrix, what we're seeing are the aspects of the ego when those defects are projecting themselves as violent, abusive, vindictive. The diagonal is there purposefully, because when you come back, when you connect what is coming from the y-axis and what is emerging from the x-axis, we will see that right there in that box, in that bright box, we see anger expressing itself as pure anger. So these are the aspects of the ego that are easily identifiable as that. I mean, you look at it and you know what that is. There is no confusion. There is no mistake. You know that that is what it is. And you know when it's lust, you know that it's lust. And you know that when it's laziness, you know that it's laziness, etc. We share this as a tool that you can use for the purpose of contemplating these psychological aggregates. Certainly now, not at the time that you're meditating. Because when we observe defects that present themselves as friendly, let's use, for example, something that we would call the charming parasite. The charming parasite is an aspect of the many psychological aggregates that we carry within that, rooted in laziness, we see manifestations of lust. Again, this projects itself as friendly. These are those egos that they behave like they're sweet. They have like a sticky smile. They tend to invite trust. And they are doing that for the sake of demanding attention, for the sake of demanding or creating some sort of attraction, of making themselves feel desired. These are defects that don't appear to be threatening at all. However, they are manifestations of lust. If you look at lust, See if we can do this. If we look at lust, expressing itself with elements of laziness, those are defects that appear to be friendly, and they will offer some charm, but with the intent of taking something back. In this case, of demanding attraction. There's also a dark aspect of this combination of lust and laziness. And that is something that, if we could refer to it as a venomous serpent, we would call it maybe a smiling viper. I mean, it may be smiling, but you know that it's dangerous. This is lust that is rooted in laziness. And it is an ego that is laced with vindictiveness. It craves for power, but it wants power without effort. It just wants the power. So it will offer kindness, and it will try to be nice, but if it's rejected, because people perceive that there is something that does not feel right there, it returns resentment. It returns mental violence. It returns cynicism. Look at these combinations. There is one that we have observed very well that is considered, that we would call the generous tyrant. And this is a combination of gluttony, if I can bring your attention to gluttony, but gluttony with pride. So here in the space where it behaves nice, this generous tyrant, it portrays friendliness. And it kind of gives things. But it is giving things only with the purpose of feeding its appetite for admiration and feeling indispensable. These are those egos that impose themselves and they say, let me do this for you. Let me go ahead and pray for this. Let me do this. They are offering things out of nowhere. And they are what? Trying to satisfy an appetite of admiration, of feeling indispensable. On the same token, there are gluttonous aspects that, of course, manifest with pride in a very violent way. And if we would call that one a generous tyrant, we will refer to this one as a starved king. A king that is fighting to stay present. And this is a gluttony that is prideful and violent. It goes beyond the idea of consuming, of trying to consume this admiration and feeling indispensable. And what they want is to own people. They want not to consume their ideas, but to own their ideas. They don't want to enjoy and taste the veneration that they receive. They want to own all of that generation, all of that veneration. And these defects, gluttonous aspects manifested with a shade of pride, they will try to be severe and they will tell you, I am teaching you your place. I am showing you how to do this because you don't know, because you are an idiot. You are this or that, you see? Notice these combinations. Let me share with you two more. Let's look at one that stands right here in this diagonal. Let's look at the prideful pride. Pride elements that are dressed in pride. You know what this is when you see it, because pride is very hypnotic. Prideful pride will listen to criticism and it will dismiss criticism with a smirk. I am better than that. I am above that. And it makes pretend that it is in total control, but in reality, behind that facade, there's fear. These elements of us, of prideful pride, they need an audience that is transactional. That means they want an audience that tolerates them because you approve of them. They may roll their eyes at you, but as long as they are giving that attention, you tolerate anything that they say. This is what prideful pride does. And the last one that I would like to share, because of recent event, because of what we have seen in the news lately, we have to use these external events as a reflection of us, is what we would call the peaceful negotiator. Let's think for a second in terms of envy and anger. Envy and anger, when portrayed as something friendly. Because again, these defects, they can try to behave like they are saints. They will try to behave like they are very useful and helpful. When envious anger presents itself as something that is helpful, as something that is useful, the friendliness that it brings forth is extremely performative. As a negotiator, it will offer concessions. It will speak of deals, win-win solutions. It will do everything that it can to get close and invite trust. But the moment that it does that, and the other terminal, the other person makes themselves vulnerable, then it attacks. We saw this recently. Two countries, they were in some peaceful negotiations. The other country was thinking everything was fine. The negotiations were going well. Suddenly, boom, there was an attack. You see? This exteriorization is a reflection of our own selves. How many instances in our lives have we not tried to get close, to invite trust, so that we can make someone pay later? These defects, aspects of envy dressed in anger. These are defects that they don't find satisfaction in victory. They find satisfaction in seeing the other one suffer. They find satisfaction in seeing chaos, destruction, and betrayal. So again, we are sharing this with you so that maybe you can add some dimension into these defects that come into the mind and not try to just stamp them as only one thing, lust or pride or laziness. No, there are combinations here. And here we see 49 departments that manifest themselves very cleverly using as many aspects of subjectiveness as it is possible to continue deceiving us. Because one thing that you may have seen by now is that you may try to identify a defect and you say, I don't know if that is pride, or if that is anger, or if that is envy, or is that laziness. We break with that subjectivity because we know that there is structure and that there are transactions between these psychological aggregates. So that's what we wanted to share with you today. A very instructional session specific to listing the 10 rules of meditation and sharing a little bit on how is it that you can apply them during the day, because we must drive continuity of purpose. Everything that we got here today, with the exception of this last slide on the 49 departments of the subconsciousness, we got directly from a transcribed lecture that Samael shared with his advanced level students titled The 10 Rules of Meditation. Dear friends, thank you so much for joining us this evening. May all beings be happy.